So hello there guys and welcome back to a brand new episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. I hope that you guys are doing well. I hope that you're staying safe as always, and we are finally here. Pre-season is over, we've seen the new cars, we've seen pre-season testing, we've had a long, arduous winter break, but now Formula One is back and we return to the scene of so many opening chapters of Formula One history. And in the 2023 edition begins, as always, in the desert in Bahrain. Joining me on this episode to talk about all the things coming up to the first round of the season, we have Courtney Pine joining me as always. And Courtney, even though we have expanded and Lee has been a very, very brilliant, actually, I can't think of a better way to say it. He's been a brilliant contribution to the team, brilliant addition to the team. That's the right word. That's the one I'm looking for. It all started with you and I a few years ago. And the reason why I feel like this is relevant to bring up is because we just hit a very huge milestone. And in the grand scheme of things, to some professional podcasters out there or big time YouTubers out there, it doesn't seem like a big thing, but I'm sure everybody out there that has achieved this knows where they were and what they were doing, and more importantly, how it felt when they achieved their first 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. And that's what we've done. Just before the season opener, we got past that 1,000 subscriber milestone after 3 long years of working incredibly hard, having many incredible guests on this show. Every single one of you that have tuned into us, listened to us talk, somewhat expressing the wheel knowledge that we have, as basic as it may be to some sometimes, regardless of your preference. We're really grateful for every single one of you that have chosen to support this show. And of course, if you don't watch this on YouTube and you listen to us on your favourite podcasting platform, we love you just as much as everybody else. So thank you to everyone for your continuous support. Of course, we have many more milestones to go. We're not going to stop at 1,000 subscribers. We want to keep going until one day we're the biggest independent F1 podcast out there. You never know, but we're certainly going to be trying our best. Now, Courtney, I don't know if you wanted to share a few words to our followers, because you were quite lively on the Instagram in your celebrations, doing a bit of a champagne celebration on the Insta as well, weren't you?
Oh, of course. It was just by coincidence. My girlfriend got me like a bottle of wine as like a late Valentine's gift. And we come back to the hotel because we went away for the weekend. And I looked, I was like 999. I was like, if we get to 1,000, gonna pop that open. And yeah, it happened. We got to 1,000. But just want a second, what you said there, Adam. Just thank you so much to everybody that subscribed. You know, like we started this just as, we were the two F1 nerds in school, and we just started this because we wanted to discuss Formula One, because we used to rabbit on about it all day. So we thought, start a podcast, discuss it, let's see if other people get involved. So the fact that 1,000 people have chosen to join the channel and get involved, it's fantastic. And you're right, Adam, we're not resting on our laurels, we're just getting started. And as I said on the video, kudos to you, Adam. You've put in a lot of work on the videos and behind the scenes, getting a guest on. So you are the backbone of this project. So thank you for everything you've done. And yeah, very much looking forward to the future, mate.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a big one for us, and hopefully a good year ahead. Plenty of great content to discuss. If anything, based on what pre-season was to go by, from the great guests and content that we've had on this show, obviously the season ahead is going to be absolutely stellar, the best one yet. And we encourage, for those of you that are new to this channel, to continue to subscribe and support us. It's the only way that we can keep doing what we do for you lovely lot, so we really appreciate it. Now, of course, they don't make YouTube play buttons for 1,000 subscriber channels anymore. That was something that they probably eradicated quite some time ago during YouTube's inception, because everybody in those early stages was doing it. So whilst we haven't got a physical 1,000 subscriber play button, I figured I'd make a, somewhat similar one in terms of the stature relative to what the 100,000 subscriber play button would look like, a silver one, and a banana. Figured that would do. There you go. A 1,000 subscriber banana. Probably going to eat this later because it's not going to last very, very long. But there you go, guys. So, yeah, don't say we don't use props on this show. Now, if I may bring the tone down a little bit, I did want to talk one thing before we get into the Bahrain preview. Unfortunately, a few days ago, we heard some very sad news. We lost a friend of the show. Stephen Featley someone who you may remember appeared on the show before. I've been on his show a few times. Big Arsenal fan, big Mercedes and Sir Lewis Hamilton fan, big F1 fan, very passionate guy. Unfortunately, we lost Stephen a few days ago. He was battling a long-term illness. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but we got the news a few days ago, and it's a very, very sad thing to hear. He was only 28 as well, so incredibly young, gone far too soon. All we can say is that we want to give our deepest condolences and sincerest thoughts to his friends and family during this difficult time. And if we may dedicate an episode of the podcast to Stephen, not only the one that he's been on himself, but this one as well, Stephen. We will miss you, and very sorry to hear the sad news. Now, if we may move on to the Bahrain Grand Prix coming up this weekend, there are plenty of stories that we discussed in our pre-season review that I did with Sam Cooper from Planet F1. The first thing has to be, Courtney, who's going to stop Max Verstappen right now? Because Red Bull look in formidable form. They did look very strong last season, and granted, Ferrari probably surprised a few people, but their pace was confirmed. There were suspicions that they were going to be quick and challenging for the race. This year, however, Red Bull not only look the favourites, it's going to take what happened last year, or an equivalent of that with reliability, perhaps, to stop them. Is there any real challenger right now for Red Bull, Courtney, or should we have a little bit more hope, perhaps? Because I'm not selling this well in terms of an open contest.
Oh, there are two things that I suppose we can take from it. There are always teams that hold back a little bit in testing. We do see teams that don't want to give away their full hand. So there will be some kind of development throughout this week. So maybe there could be a surprise package. I think with Ferrari, we always expect Ferrari to take a step forward this season. Now they seem to have got over their reliability issues. So once they do that, I think they'll be able to close in. Mercedes, their concept, the hard pod concept, could go either way, but if they do sort of understand the issues that slowed them down last season, the porpoising is now out of the way. So if Mercedes sort of unlock, they probably have some pace to unlock. I do expect a sharp development curve this season. But with the race itself, it does seem like Red Bull are the team to beat. But let's not forget that a lot can happen in a Formula One race. So even though I'm expecting Red Bull to dominate, there could be a lot of things that could come into the race that could affect the result. And I think the biggest talking point is Aston Martin, the team that I put so much faith in with my 2023 predictions. They could well be the team to watch. Even though Red Bull be running away in the distance, Aston Martin could well be the biggest talking point in this Grand Prix.
Yeah, it's very true. There are plenty of stories to look forward to for this Grand Prix, despite the fact that I was sort of selling it as if it was Red Bull's race to lose already. We saw the emergence of Aston Martin in testing, and it's kind of difficult to gauge where they're really at, because we've seen Aston Martin in tests gone by where they've had an absolutely abysmal session, and then it takes them a little bit of time to get up to speed. They're on the back foot, but eventually they do come strong towards the end of the season. This season, however, they look very, very good. In Fernando Alonso's hands, they look brilliant. The only downside for them is that it's likely that they're going to be going with Felipe Drogovic, although I haven't heard any formal confirmation of that yet from the team. They're still waiting to see how that's going down with Lance Stroll. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Courtney, if Lance Stroll was driving the car this weekend, surely Aston Martin would have announced it by now. I mean,
yeah.
Do you feel that they've handled this in a very strange way, or they're treading maybe on eggshells over not announcing the boss's son is going to be is not going to be driving?
They probably are treading on eggshells. They're probably leaving it as late as possible to give Lance a chance. That wasn't supposed to rhyme, but it did. But yeah, they probably are trying to give Lance a chance to get behind the wheel, but I don't think that's ideal preparation for the weekend. If you're setting the car up, and you've got ideas how you're going to set up for the weekend, you want to know who you have driving, because obviously every driver have different driving styles, different preferences of how to set up the car. So it does seem that this weekend, whether Lance comes back or not, they're going to be putting all their hopes on Fernando, which isn't the worst driver in the world to put your hopes on, but yeah, I do feel that even if Aston Martin are up there, there's only going to be one Aston Martin in the mix. So all eyes will be on Fernando this weekend for certain.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know the full extent of Lance's injuries. I know it was reported that he'd hurt his wrist. Some people were saying that he'd broken his wrist, which obviously is a little bit more severe. We can only speculate. We don't know any details. So, guys, take anything that we say with a pinch of salt right now, because we know as much as you guys do on this subject. And for me, that is quite telling. I almost feel that, playing devil's advocate here, I almost feel that sometimes in a situation like this, as strange as it was to hear this news about Lance Stroll, the less that we hear from it, the worse it may be. And I'm not suggesting for a second that Lance Stroll is going to miss a few races, but if it was just the one weekend, and bear in mind, we're going to have the race in Jeddah in a couple of weeks' time, and then Melbourne, and then we're going to have a long break before Baku at the end of April. If Lance was going to be ready in the short term, we probably would have heard something by now.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't even help Felipe Drugovich, who right now is the stand-in. He had a 4 days running of testing, split over 2 sessions, although, the first one was a little bit hampered by a reliability issue. This is going to be a tough one for him. If he does get the call-up, Courtney, it's not like, it's not like when Sebastian Vettel was out because of the pandemic last year, he fell sick. And Hulkenberg stepped in. Hulkenberg was a ready-made driver with the experience of driving Formula One cars, even if he wasn't used to the current crop of cars that we see today. And of course, he's going to be a lot more prepared for that this year with Haas. Drugovich, on the other hand, despite being the F2 champion, he's going to be incredibly raw. I'd be very surprised if Drugovich gets the opportunity that he's going to be anywhere near Fernando Alonso, or even go as far as scoring points. I think that would be an incredible achievement for him, even if the car is fast.
Yeah, I mean, look, if the Aston Martin is fast, he's going to be coming up against the likes of, well, I think we all know Verstappen would be well out of the way. It'd be coming up against the likes of Leclerc, Hamilton, Russell, Sainz, obviously his own teammate. So it'd be a tough ask of him to get a great result. But look, if he does, he'll be putting his name right there. The entire grid will be watching him. It'd be a great move for his career. And honestly, it's every driver's dream to drive a Formula One car. So I think he'd be happy to bring the car home, but I think it'd be a lot to ask for him to get, I don't know, if Aston Martin have the third fastest car. It'd be a lot to ask for him to get a top 6 finish, because he's coming up against some seasoned professionals.
I mean, where do you think Aston Martin are in the pecking order? Because of course they had an incredible test. It's very easy to say that they may have gone for some glory runs or running a bit lighter or a higher engine mode than some of the other teams around, like Alpine, for example, who are probably the benchmark for the midfield from last season. That's what I would put Aston Martin at this point in time. Yeah. I know some people have even gone as far as saying that they might even challenge Mercedes or even Ferrari in the same way that, Force India did a couple of years ago. I mean, where do you see Aston Martin?
I think, I think they're probably the solid 4th team. And it all depends on which Mercedes we see. If we see the Mercedes from the beginning of last year, then they could well be challenging, for the top 6 positions. But I think there's been a lot of doom and gloom surrounding Mercedes, but I was encouraged by the last day running. They, of course, they weren't level with the Red Bull or even the Ferrari, but they were certainly closer than when they were at the beginning of last season. So I do feel that Aston Martin will be the 4th fastest team. And I feel that talent of Lewis and George will keep Mercedes just ahead. But for me, the sort of the Formula One fan in general would love to see Fernando Alonso battle with Lewis Hamilton, because look, let's not sugarcoat it. Fernando Alonso is still salty about 2007, and he always seems to up his game when he comes against Lewis. So if these two drivers meet on track, it will get spicy, because it always does.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Fernando does. I mean, I don't expect to see an Aston Martin on the front 3 rows of the grid, but if it does, Fernando can definitely put it there. And, the Fernando of old and Fernando of new, if you like, he can drag that car from a difficult position. And who knows, it could be a crazy race. I do think it's going to require some element of misfortune or reliability problems for some of the bigger teams ahead of them, but you certainly can't rule out a possibility of Fernando Alonso doing something special. And these early rounds, if the Aston Martin genuinely does have the pace, and we're going to find out this weekend if it does, the early weekends are the ones where you take advantage of that. Kevin Magnussen last season was a prime example of that, getting a solid P5 for Haas. It never really got better than that throughout the season for them, unsurprisingly. So, these early opportunities are going to be the ones that he has to take. We should move on to Mercedes, if you like. Yeah, as you mentioned, Courtney, they are in a bit of a paradox. We don't really know roughly where they are. I don't think that they're going to be in a position where they're looking over their shoulder too much at Aston Martin. I do think they're closer to the front than perhaps pre-season testing showed, but they are on the back foot a little bit coming into the season opener, somewhere where they probably hoped they wouldn't be. It's almost a bit like Red Bull from a few years ago, where you got their development over the course of the season. They might start off on the back foot. They understand their car better. They start to catch up the leaders, and then the season is over. And in that winter period, the top team has obviously had a bit more time to develop their car in the interim, and Mercedes start the season a little bit further behind, or at least where they were to begin with. So, what do you think they need to do this weekend to sort that out? I mean, they've got rid of a few of the big problems, but at the moment, they're not quite sure where they are pace-wise.
Yeah, they're going to be relying on their drivers, but let's be honest, if you wanted two drivers to be behind a car that isn't quite where you want it to be, you would pick Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. So I think they will drive everything they can out of that car and pull it into the mix. The optimist in me is thinking they could challenge at least one of the Ferraris, and maybe Sergio Perez, because I still believe that you've got the Max gap. I think the reason why I'm saying Red Bull running away is because of Max. I think Sergio Perez will be in that mix of the top six. Again, I'm rhyming a lot tonight, and I'm not meaning to. Perez will be in the mix of the top six, but Max will be running away. I just think it's a case of who will be in and around the podium positions. Look, I know we always make the podium positions at the end, so I'm not gonna say it right now. But I think Max is going to run away. But I think beyond that pack behind Max is going to be exciting. That is where the main focus of this race will be.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we talk about Red Bull in such a glowing manner in terms of their performance and what we expect from them. There was even a hint that Red Bull were probably holding back a little bit as well. After the first day, they probably thought, wow, we are in such great shape. And, one thing that we can say about Red Bull coming into this season is that they look like they have a car that you can literally just put on the track and just crack on with things. It's already quick. The other teams around them obviously still have to do some tinkering, which is obviously not going to be ideal. Fortunately, you'll be afforded the time to do that anyway. So it is a little bit like a role reversal between them and Ferrari in terms of the characteristics of their car and how good Ferrari was able to have the balance at the start of the weekend. But as the weekend pressed on, Red Bull started to come into their own and overhaul them. Looking at that battle, it's going to be quite important. Even if Mercedes aren't a part of it right now, it's going to be important for them not to lose sight of that and not to fall further behind. It seems like they've eradicated the biggest problem, which was porpoising. They understand the car a lot better. It is a gamble on this concept because we're currently seeing 3 different types of concepts right now, and the other 2 are, on the surface seem to be better right now, but Mercedes sticking to their guns. Do you think that's a sensible approach, Courtney, or do you feel that perhaps Mercedes have to make a tough decision at some point whether or not this Hyde pod concept, if you like, is going to succeed?
I think that the thing that concerns me with Mercedes is that there's already talk of them looking at a plan B. Now, look, it's obviously good management to always have a plan B, but it concerns me that if they go away from this Hyde pod concept, I do feel that them getting on top of this Hyde pod concept is the best chance of them winning. Because if you're going to copy the Red Bull or even the Ferrari, Red Bull and Ferrari are always going to have the more refined version of that concept because they've had more time to understand the concept they're working with. So if they try and copy Red Bull or Ferrari, they're always going to be behind to an extent. I do feel the best thing for them to do, obviously just me as a humble armchair fan, would be to stick with what they've got, make the most of it, and then when you've got a next big regulation change, I think it's 2025, that's when they can take advantage of that. But I suppose the thing that's different now compared to years in the past is that we've got this new, we've got this yet another regulation change with the wind tunnel time, development time, and maybe with Mercedes finishing third last season, they might have a bit more time to figure out the issues around the high pod concept. But at the same time, as you said, Adam, they gotten over the porpoising, which was the main issue. So maybe they could have more of a steep development curve. Now they're able to understand what's happening with the car. Because with the car rattling around all the time, the sensors are going all over the place. So it's difficult for them to get the data that they need. So I do expect them to start behind. But Mercedes could be a team to keep an eye on later on in the season. Maybe when we get towards the European part of the season, maybe that's where Mercedes will be in a frame a bit more.
Yeah, it's hard to say with Mercedes. I think a lot of people often forget how impressive their development was last season, considering the issues that they had. We know Sir Lewis Hamilton spent a lot of time trying to do a lot of the donkey work, if you like, to really make a bad car better. And George Russell was just going about extracting the maximum that he could out of it and getting result after result after result. It was only until later on in the season when Mercedes were in a position where they thought, right, we can now fight with some of the bigger teams. Porpoising is not as bad for us as it was. And they were relatively competitive. They outscored Ferrari in the second half of the season and nearly overhauled them overall. So you look at this season and you think, if Mercedes can, get rid of those issues that they had last season, porpoising was one of them, and it looks like for now that they've done that. We should credit the fact that Bahrain is one of the bumpier circuits because they haven't resurfaced it since its inception in 2004. So obviously it's going to trigger porpoising more than other circuits. So that's always a good thing too. If they can get rid of the other issues and other ailments of their car, like the dragginess that it had last season and the lack of front end grip and other things like that, they are in a good position where they can try and overhaul the teams ahead of them at the end of the season. I suppose it goes in tandem, Courtney, as well with Red Bull's plight, if you like, and that's going to be the sanctions imposed on them, self-inflicted, of course, by the cost cap. And with Red Bull, you could argue that considering how impressive they look right now is owing to the fact that they had the championship wrapped up quite early on.
Mm-hmm.
So they were able to allocate a lot of development time to the 2023 car. Because of what's coming for 2024, and obviously they're being hindered by already, you could see the possibility of Red Bull, if they dominate the championship, as some people may fear that they will, especially in Max Verstappen's hand, they could mitigate those sanctions imposed on them by allocating that time purely to 2024. If they do that, that may preserve their advantage for 2024, but it may allow opportunities for Mercedes and maybe Ferrari in the latter half of the season as well to continue to develop their car and catch them in 2023. It's a bit convoluted, but it's something that I could see happening.
Well, look, that's exactly what the sport needs right now. And that was, when you had Ross Brawn and the people at the very top, talking up these 2022 regulation changes, they said it would give more competition for race wins and podiums. And let's hope that is the case, because I'm sure there'll be long-term listeners that'll be, oh, you're such a hypocrite. You wasn't complaining when Mercedes were dominating. Look, I wasn't complaining, but at the same time, I could understand why other people were, because unless you're a Max Verstappen fan, you're not going to enjoy seeing the same guy win every single race. It's nothing against the talent of the guy. We know that he's one of the best drivers on the grid and could go on to be an all-time great of the sport. But for so many years now, we've had one team dominating at the front. And, it was 2021 was a breath of fresh air. But since then, it just seemed to be, oh, here we go. It's just a team dominating. It's just a new team doing it. What we want to see is the best drivers of this generation coming up against each other. I want to be seeing more of Max against Leclerc, Max against George Russell. Let's get Fernando Alonso in the mix, because something I find interesting is that you have Max Verstappen fans and Alonso fans simping over each other because they haven't come head to head yet. Let's see what happens. Let's see if this bromance that happens between Max and Alonso, let's see if that continues, if they start battling each other on track. We're so far, we've been robbed of some great battles. And if these teams come closer together, we're going to be having these great moments that we'll be watching live and looking back on. And let's be honest, as content creators, Adam, feels weird saying that. As content creators, we want to be seeing the drama. We want to be seeing the best coming up against the best with the close driving. But this is the conflict of interest that happens with Formula One, because there are two things of it. One, you want to celebrate the best drivers in the world going at it for the grand prize, but also F1, we should celebrate innovation. So you don't want to be going down too badly on the teams that have found the innovations to dominate. But this is always a conflict of interest we have with Formula One, and it's always trying to find that level.
Yeah, no, I hear you. What I want to know is when the Ferrari era of dominance is coming back, because 2 races in a row ain't cutting it for me. I want a few years out of this, but Ferrari will be Ferrari, so I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen anytime soon. Much to my dismay. Speaking of Ferrari, we should talk about them. What did you make of them in testing, Courtney? Because, you know, the Ferrari fan inside me suspects they are holding a little bit back, as they were last season. But I think that's more out of hope than expectation. I think because of how good Red Bull have been. I think if we rewind 12 months ago and Red Bull looked good, Mercedes looked like they were in trouble, but everyone said they were sandbagging until we started to see, actually, this is the real thing. And Ferrari looked supremely good. But a lot of people threw the obvious caveats, I was one of them, that you have to wait until qualifying to see if Ferrari are really, really good. And even then, Ferrari maximised that weekend, something that they didn't do very often throughout the season, but they maximised the Bahrain weekend. Do you feel that there's a realistic chance that Ferrari could be doing that again in 2023, and that when they turn up to the first race of the season, despite some of the ailments they may have had in pre-season testing or tweaks and etc., that they're in the fight with Red Bull good enough to beat them on race day on merit?
Like, first of all, I think if we're looking at anybody to get the better of Max Verstappen and Red Bull, it is Ferrari. I think a lot of the hope for a good race weekend for the win itself is coming from Ferrari. But I feel that Ferrari and with their fan base, they're almost the definition of insanity. Insanity, the same old things over and over again and expecting the same results. Adam, I was looking through old episodes, and one of the episodes, I think it was either 2020 or 2021, can Ferrari bounce back in 2021? It's like we've been saying it year after year after year. But the thing is, the potential is there. But Ferrari always seem to find a way. They're like Adam, you're not gonna like me for saying this, but they're like the Spurs of Formula One. They always find a way to
Oh, no,
Spurs it because
I am not having that. No, 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 no,
they
no. I'm
always find
sorry.
the way to mess it up. Adam, tell me I'm wrong. Last season
Yeah, but Ferrari
they
win things. Tottenham don't. At least be
they
the Man
haven't won
United.
they haven't won a championship for 15 years. We have to stop. They haven't won a championship. They've gone without a championship for as long as Spurs have gone without a trophy, Adam. I'm sorry. I'm talking
Nah,
pure facts here.
no, you're not. No, you're not. I'm not having that. At least Man
Okay,
United.
when did I think Spurs won a League Cup in 2008? That was the last time Ferrari they won the constructors in 2008. Adam, I know you don't appreciate me saying this, but the facts are there. The potential is there. Look, I'm not taking it away. The potential is there, and I hope they do. I want to see Ferrari in the mix. I love Charles Leclerc as a driver. He can be a world champion. He can give some great battles with Max Verstappen. But I just don't trust Ferrari. I don't. They have the package, but they always find a way to mess it up.
Yeah, I'm still not accepting Ferrari or the Spurs of Formula One. I'm not having that. At the very least, the Man United, they win things, but they haven't won a championship in a good number of years.
Man United won a trophy last week, Adam. You're still waiting
we're
15
comparing
years
the
for
League
one.
Cup to the F1 World Championship, Courtney. I mean, the League Cup's kind of like, I don't know, the Spanish Grand Prix or something like that. Sorry, I just had to pick one that wasn't like a gem in the circuit. So any Spanish listeners, please don't unsubscribe. We love you. But look, I just feel with Ferrari that there's normally a lot of pressure on them, and I still think that there is. I think coming into this race, given the headlines have been mostly about Red Bull, Aston Martin, Mercedes, and a few others, and even McLaren, but not necessarily for the right reasons, in a weird way, the attention has been taken away from Ferrari. There's still that hope and expectation with them that they are going to be Red Bull's biggest challengers, and maybe a lot of neutral fans are kind of hoping that Ferrari are, and that
being one of them.
Well, yeah, there you go. I mean, Red Bull aren't half a second clear on outright pace, and Max Verstappen wins in record time. We just got to hope that that's the case. I mean, going into this Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc obviously winning last season. Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz actually looked more comfortable in the car in pre-season testing than Leclerc. Leclerc was getting up to speed as the test went on and obviously found his way towards the end of it. So I guess Ferrari, the drivers are prepared as they're going to be. I think for them, it's a case of just finding the best balance that they can with their car to get the most pace out of the SF23 and just hope that they're in the ballpark with Red Bull. And at the very least, they can capitalise on Red Bull's issues if they have similar issues to what they had last year.
And this is where Fred Vasseurs' management's going to be under scrutiny, because if Red Bull have a scrappy weekend for whatever reason, or shall I say scruffy, Ferrari should be, in theory, the team to capitalise on it. So Ferrari need to go against their usual habits, let's say, and give us a race, because that it goes back to my original point, Adam. Unless you're a Red Bull fan, or or unless for Mercedes have a strong start to the weekend, I think a good amount of the F1 fan base will be rooting for Ferrari, because you don't want to be seeing the same guy winning all the races. Same thing would have happened when Mercedes were dominating. I don't want people getting on my back. I've explained how I feel about it. Ferrari are going to be the best hope, in theory, of giving us a competitive race. So we hope they can. The potential is there. But I want to be seeing the new era coming in with Fred Vasseur, fine-tuning these things that they tend to get wrong, like reliability, pit stop issues, strategy. I want to be seeing a new Ferrari, because that's what we need to have a good championship battle this year.
Yeah. And if it brings any comfort to anyone listening to this that might hope Ferrari or even Mercedes are winners this weekend, don't despair, because Bahrain or the opening race of the season is proven to have been a bit of a poison chalice to the winner in terms of the championship. Since 2017, every single year, the driver that's won the opening race of the season has failed to win the Drivers' Championship by the end of it. So if Max Verstappen goes on to dominate the Bahrain Grand Prix, either that trend is going to be bucked once and for all, or we're going to end up with a new world champion by the end of the year. So we'll have to wait and see. Of course, Max fans will probably tell me that he's going to buck that trend. And if he does, fair play to him. I mean, he looks formidable right now in a car that is equally as impressive. Quick word on Sergio Perez, Courtney. We haven't talked about him yet. He looked pretty good in pre-season testing. He looked quite positive. He looked comfortable with the car. He looked fast. He set Red Bull's fastest time and the fastest time of the test. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a big opportunity for Perez to impress. Not sure if he's going to be involved in the championship picture as much as he'd like to be, and we don't need to go into the reasons why. But a lot of pressure on him to, at the very least, come second if that Red Bull is the dominant car.
I feel that if one thing is going to derail Red Bull this season, it is going to be the dynamic between their drivers. We did see it get upset last season, and I'm sorry, it doesn't just go away. You can put out all the PR you want. I don't think that has gone away. If Sergio Perez starts the season strong, there will be sort of bad feeling building up there. And if the other teams do get their act together, I think they can capitalise on the bad feeling that could develop between the two drivers. But look, generally speaking, we know that Red Bull develop a car to suit Max. I think we saw Alex Albon put a few quotes out recently that was picked up by the BBC saying that, Max likes a car that's sort of focused on the front end. And they've been doing that for a few years. And look, you can't blame Red Bull. Max Verstappen is the driver of his generation. They are going to back Max, but it just makes it a lot more difficult if you're the driver on the other side of the garage. And that unfortunately is, for Sergio Perez, that's him. So it'll be very interesting if he does start strong. And maybe Red Bull will need Sergio Perez to start strong, because if the other teams do start catching up, they need to be getting those maximum points in the early end of the season.
Yeah, it's true. And it probably plays into why Red Bull recruited Sergio Perez rather than retain Albon or retain Gasly or even retain Ricciardo, even though Ricciardo went on his own volition. It comes down to one thing, and Red Bull asking themselves, can we win the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship with the lineup that we have? In 2022, they did. They dominated it. So if they do that again, why would they change it? This is kind of part and parcel with Mercedes for the last 7 or 8 years, with Hamilton and Bottas, Bottas may not be able to get the best out of the car in the same way Hamilton did, although in fairness to Valtteri Bottas, I think he got a lot more out of that car than some of the other Red Bull drivers have compared to Max Verstappen, if you like. But the question was, if we're dominating the championship and more often than not finishing first and second and winning both championships, there's no problem. Eventually, they were put into a position where they had to promote George Russell, because if they didn't, they would have lost him. If George Russell wasn't around, Valtteri Bottas probably would still be driving that car today.
Okay.
That's the reality of it. So I think as long as Perez does similar to what he did last season, but perhaps add a little bit more on that to quash those concerns, and he's able to extrapolate 95% of that Red Bull's performance, which I believe he can, even if it is a difficult car to set up because it's favoured towards Max, then fair enough. I think these days the Red Bull's probably a little bit more akin to both their drivers than it is to just the number one. I think that's just how these cars are, and Perez is obviously doing a lot better than he was in 2021, for example, when he was nowhere compared to his teammates. So, yeah, we'll have to see, but big season ahead for Perez, and I'm sure whilst he will want to be involved in the championship picture, as long as he's there or thereabouts or asking the question, you certainly can't go wrong there. And he was for somewhat of last season, but not all the way through. We should move on, Courtney, to some of the other stories on the grid. The midfield battle is going to be a key one. I think we should probably start, though, with McLaren, a team that, not that I want to stick the knife in, but this is a team that I was hoping was going to be challenging at the front end of the midfield. Quite frankly, the only teams that I feel they're going to be racing with this weekend are AlphaTauri and Williams, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, I'm very, very surprised with McLaren, and I just don't know where they're going. They've got Lando Norris, who we know is one of the drivers with the most potential on the grid. They're brought in Oscar Piastri. There's obviously a lot of excitement surrounding him, and I don't know. It just seems to be very underwhelming what's happening at that team. They seem to be recovering. We saw the sort of big shoots of recovery when Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris were driving together. And they seem to have stagnated, and now they seem to be in a situation where they're heading backwards. And maybe the issues that Danny Ricciardo had, maybe the issues are going to be highlighted more this season with the team sort of struggling more towards the back. It is concerning. I do think that McLaren should be challenging for podiums and championships. They are one of the biggest teams on the grid, and for some of the younger fans, they might think, why are they calling McLaren a big team? Aren't they the second most successful or the third most successful team in Formula One history? And that's close between them and Williams. But a team of McLaren's size should be doing a lot better. They had to drop in 2014. They got back up. I don't understand why they've suddenly, because they've got the funding, they've got the personnel, they've got the sponsorship. There's no reason why this team should be potentially struggling at the back as the way they might be this weekend.
No, I agree. It's a very, very strange one. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day after we recorded the preview, or the season pre-season review, if you like. And I was listening to a podcast, and someone made a very, very good point on McLaren. And I want to share this for the benefit of this conversation because I feel like it is relevant. Somewhere along the way last season, McLaren looked like they were progressing quite well. Lando Norris was obviously doing a fantastic job and dragging that car beyond what it was probably should have been capable of in a normal driver's hands. And as difficult as it was to drive, they were competing with Alpine for best of the rest. That's where we feel they should be. They've always talked about trying to make this step going forward and potentially being one of the big teams again, but they've never really been in a position to act like a big team. They haven't got the infrastructure. They haven't got the resources that the big three teams have at this point in time. Yes, I know there's a budget cap and McLaren can possibly meet that, but there have been some financial difficulties as well over the last few years, and they're still in that ballpark right now. I would say with Alpine, an established team with all the facilities that they need to go forward, and there's something extra that they're not quite getting yet. Aston Martin, I would say, probably have less resources than what McLaren have in terms of a decent wind tunnel and simulator and everything else. I know McLaren loaned theirs from the Toyota one in Cologne, but Aston Martin are building something, and they're trying to take that huge leap forward to becoming a big team, one that's going to be competing for world championships, and what they're going to have is going to be mega. No other team on the grid is going to be able to compete with them in terms of infrastructure in the short term when it's all ready. That leads me down the road to looking at their car for this season, And because of the somber reaction to it, the launch where Andrea Stella was talking about being realistic, Andrea Seidel moving on to the CEO role at Alfa Romeo, or Audi, if you like, as it's going to be, and what they're saying about the cars, we're not going to see the real proper car until its first massive upgrade package after 4 or 5 races. The one theory I've got, that isn't mine in fairness, but I'm going to share it with you, is somewhere between 2022 and 2023, McLaren were obviously working on a concept for 2023. And at some point down the road, they've abandoned that and gone a different direction. The problem with that, it's kind of hits you twofold. Not only are you going to bring out a 2023 car, the only one you could bring out, which is basically an older version of a development project, which obviously was never going to be the finished article, but you had to put something out there to run. In 2024, you're already going to be behind there, and you're going to be behind on that new concept where everybody else is progressing with the concepts that they have in 2023. So there's a lot of pressure on McLaren getting the 2023 car right. When eventually they get that big first upgrade package, Courtney, it could make or break their season, because they're going to be on the back foot, but they have to hope that they've got something that's going to prove to have more potential than what they would have done if they'd followed through on the first concept. As I said, this is just a theory. It's not even my original theory, but it does make sense given where McLaren are going right now. And all I can say is, McLaren fans, strap yourselves in, because it's going to be a bumpy ride. I just hope that when they come out the other side, they're going to be back where they belong, at the very least, fighting at the top end of the midfield. If you ask my honest opinion, I'm not convinced.
Right.
I live in hope in this regard.
Yeah, and the other thing is, McLaren's prize asset right now is Lando Norris, and they're running out of time when it comes to keeping him. Yeah, they've put him on a long-term contract. Look, we all know how these contracts work. They can be bought out of these contracts. Some of these F1 teams have so much money, and he's already showing early signs of frustration. We saw it in a preseason test. I do think there was a big meal made out of nothing, because apparently showing his frustration knowing he was on camera. There was another reaction to that, but there's no doubt in it. Lando will be feeling frustration. He's seen one of his karting mates, George Russell, now win a race, now win a car that could potentially go for championships in the coming seasons. And he's obviously there thinking, look, I want some of that. I think we can all agree that Lando's worthy of being a race winner. He should have won in Russia in 2021. We all know that he has the potential to challenge for world championships with the right machinery. And I've said it before. I feel the big threat for McLaren when it comes to holding on to Lando Norris is when Lewis Hamilton retires, because either Mercedes are going to be looking at Lando Norris, or McLaren are going to be the victims of the domino effect that we're going to see. When Lewis retires, there's going to be a lot of movement with particularly the teams at the top. And these teams will be looking at Lando Norris. We know Red Bull have shown interest in Lando Norris in the past. So I feel that McLaren have got 2 years left to hold on to Lando Norris. If they're not up there by the end of 2024, I think it's time for them to say goodbye, because Lando Norris deserves to be at the very front.
Very much so. And it's something that I think a lot of us want to see. When it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, remains to be seen. Quick note on Oscar Piastri. His F1 debut this weekend looked quite good in pre-season testing. All things considered, the McLaren wasn't fast, but he seemed to handle himself quite well. What should we expect from him this weekend? Because this is a guy that has left the team in Alpine. We all thought he was making the sensible switch to McLaren. And look, I'm going to play devil's advocate again here, but he may be looking across at where Pierre Gasly is sitting right now, thinking that was my seat, and I decided to turn it down for something that I thought would be better. But in the short term, might have been a bit better off staying where he was. But we'll see. How do you think he's going to get on this weekend?
Yeah, I think first of all, hindsight is a powerful thing. And yeah, I completely agree. He probably is looking at, oh, damn it, I should have probably stayed at Alpine. But in a weird way, I feel if you're a rookie driver, you kind of want your team to be, you're not wanting, but you obviously, because you want to be going for they're all there to win. I don't think any of them are happy with second place. But if you're new to the sport, you want your team to be kind of out of the spotlight. So it just helps you settle in a bit more. If Oscar Piastri was to make a mistake that, costs him 11th. He ends up finishing 13th. It isn't going to get as much attention if he makes a mistake that costs him a podium or even potentially a win. So maybe the position of McLaren are in will suit Oscar. We've seen some of these other great drivers that have come in. They start off, if you have a look at Fernando Alonso, for example, he started off at Minardi. It just gave him the opportunity to settle into the sport, get into the groove, make a name for himself, and build from there. So maybe in a strange way, the situation at McLaren could suit Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, it could well do. I certainly hope it does. I like the bravery of the move, especially under the circumstances, and I'm all for what Piastri did, really. He was in the right. Alpine, much love to Alpine, but they kind of fuddled it up, really. They didn't really give him what he needed, and he decided to go elsewhere. And I think it's a good move, but obviously this one is going to take some time before McLaren start to really deliver on what they can do. And they've got a fantastic driver in Oscar Piastri in their car. I think he's one of the most sought-after young drivers on the grid, on top of the other most sought-after young driver on the grid that they currently have in Lando Norris. It's going to be an interesting dynamic between the two. Quick word on Haas this weekend. Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg. Hülkenberg probably making his final return to Formula One. Looked good in pre-season testing, very much up to speed. The Haas looked good. Didn't really have the spark of 2022 car. But it's there or thereabouts, and definitely within a shout of points if things go their way. What do you make of that team dynamic, Courtney? Because on the surface, a lot of people, myself included, weren't exactly fans of the decision that Haas made with Nico Hülkenberg replacing Mick Schumacher. But the more I think about it, the more it starts to make sense. So does that mean that Haas are going to have a strong season and a strong weekend?
I think has to be hoping to have more of a flatlined season, let's say. And with the driver pairing that they have, they will get that sort of. They've got a pair of steady eddies in their car, and I think that's what they want. They want a steady season because Haas traditionally come out of the blocks fairly well, and then they don't develop the car and find themselves languishing at the back again. So maybe with this driver pairing that they have, maybe represents where they want to be as a team this season. Start off around the midfield and continue to stay there. I think they aim to be like an Alfa Romeo that sort of finish in and around the points. I think that's a decent business model for where Haas are as a team. So the driver pairing and where they're hoping to go with development actually makes a lot of sense right now.
Yeah, it's one of the more experienced driver pairings, and I think to their credit are both drivers that when you need them to deliver and get some solid results, they're very capable of doing that. Something that, to Haas's credit, they haven't necessarily had the last few seasons, but now they do. So hopefully for their sake, they're able to capitalise when they have those opportunities to score some big points. Alpine, of course, we can't go the full episode without talking about them, Courtney. A team that, I threw a lot of caveats their way to try and justify why they're going to be further up the grid than pre-season testing suggests. They did a fair decent amount of mileage. It was a very strict program. They were the slowest team, but for me, I just thought, well, that's not indicative of the car performance. That's obviously the program that they were running. And, on top of everything else, we have to remember they only had 3 days. Not a lot of time, fewer days than they've had in any other season in the history of the sport for pre-season testing since they were doing that. So obviously you need to make every lap count. And Alpine looked like they certainly did in terms of what's important. They didn't necessarily focused on how fast the car is over one lap, but considering how good last year's car was, and it was easily the best car other than a Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari. So there's absolutely no reason in my mind that they're going to be so far down. They've lost so much performance compared to everybody else that they're going to struggle. I'm very much expecting Alpine and Aston Martin to be locking horns this weekend.
I really do expect there to be a very, very tight midfield battle this year. And I'll be honest, I'm hoping for the drivers to be very close on performance because I want to be seeing Ocon against Gasly. I'm not going to lie, I've been rubbing my hands thinking about this since the announcement was made. Same thing as I've said about Verstappen and Perez. Alpine, look, you can do all the PR talk you want, but when you got two guys at the same nationality, grew up karting together, the personal stuff I'm not going to raise here. The moment you're starting to compete for position and dominance within a team, it's bound to kick off. Like famously with Lewis and Nico, they got on well, relatively well as children, but the moment they got a sniff of glory, it all started to, kick off. So if there's one driver pairing, it will kick off if they're close. It's certainly Alpine. And if you throw that in with a tight midfield battle, we could well be in for a titanic battle this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly going to be one that I'll be keeping an eye on, purely and simply because we've heard all the stories, we've heard all the rhetoric, we've heard all the responses from the drivers, the PR media, and everybody else who's been asking this question. Are they going to clash? Are they going to get along? We're finally going to get an answer to that this weekend. And it's likely, given their performance and the calibre of the two drivers that they have, very, very similar in different ways, there is a very high chance that they're going to come together on track. And look, I wouldn't exactly say Pierre Gasly's made himself the most difficult teammate to race with. Esteban Ocon, on the other hand, not to throw shade at him because I have a lot of respect for him as well, but just for the benefit of the argument, he does have a history of these incidents. And I think by Fernando Alonso's admission, it would serve Ocon well to pick and choose his battles a bit more wisely and also know how far to push his teammate. We had Otmar Schaffner as well talking about this. He seems relatively confident that he's going to be able to keep these two under control. But unless I'm mistaken, he was the Alpine boss last year when things were kicking off between Alonso and Ocon, although granted two very fiery drivers in terms of the inter-team battle in their history. He was also the team boss when Ocon and Perez were up to their old antics at Racing Point and Force India respectively. So, I don't know, Courtney, it's got the recipes there. I don't want to goad it, but if someone asked me who I would put in charge to manage expectations within a team, with all due respect to Otmar, he's not the first person I would choose.
No, look, we've seen some of the best names in F1 management struggle with the rivalries. We've seen Christian Horner struggle with it with Vettel and Webber. We've also seen Toto Wolff struggle with it when you had Lewis and Nico. So look, these guys, they all want to be the best. They want to be number one. They've got massive egos. They've had their egos massaged since they were children. These guys are sometimes almost impossible to manage. So as I said, you can make all the PR talk you want, but when it comes down to the battles on track, the adrenaline's rushing. They all want to beat each other. We will see. I think we all expect there to be fireworks at that team at some point this season. It's just a case of how far they go with each other.
Yeah, very, very true. We'll have to wait and see. Certainly going to be interesting. Let's move on to your favourite team, Courtney, Alfa Romeo.
Okay.
Pre-season testing. Well, they were fastest on day 2, going for their glory run as they do. For me, I feel they're going to be a team at the back end of the midfield.
Yeah.
P7, a position that they love from previous years gone by. But what are we expecting from them? That they're a team that's they love to go under the radar. It's very easy for them to sort of disappear in plain sight, but they don't look too bad, to be honest. If people aren't careful, they might do something this weekend.
Well, yeah, traditionally they do come out of the blocks fairly strong. So if you're having a look at like teams like McLaren, AlphaTauri, who we expect to struggle, they're going to be the type of teams that Alfa Romeo will be targeting to beat this weekend. So they're going to need a strong start. I still don't think we're seeing the best of Valtteri Bottas at the team. Very difficult to showcase his talent at a team that sort of just happy to languish in the very centre, the very core of the F1 grid. But I want to be seeing more from Valtteri Bottas this year. Like it's not me having to go at the guy, but I do feel that overall he's actually a very underrated driver. I think it's very difficult when your teammates with somebody like Lewis Hamilton. As I said, with the likes of Max Verstappen as well, and it's very easy to attack these guys. So I want to be seeing more from Valtteri because we know that there is more there.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we should expect an improvement from Zhou Guanyu this season. I don't think he had a bad season. I think he did okay. But it was one of those where his performances started to grow as the car started to decline. And I think the telling factor is that whilst Zhou Guanyu, a lot of us, myself included, said he had a decent season, he scored 4 points. Valtteri scored 51. And I'm pretty certain Alfa Romeo are not going to want that kind of deficit or gulf between their two drivers this season. Ultimately, it comes down to Zhou getting the points in the early stages when the car has a performance advantage. That was something he didn't really do last season. Yes, reliability was a factor at play, but Bottas was driving the same car and I know it's probably not fair to compare someone of Bottas's reputation and experience compared to Zhou, but those are, the first rival in Formula One is your teammate.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first measuring stick for Zhou. So he's going to have to try and do something. And this could be a big year for him. He's going to be under pressure. I want to talk about AlphaTauri, if I may. This is a team that had a very disappointing 2022. Nothing I've seen from them so far is suggesting to me it's going to be any different in 2023, but they have a very interesting driver lineup, a lot of exuberance, a lot of energy about it in Nick De Vries and Yuki Tsunoda. In all honesty, Courtney, he's got all the recipes for being a team that might be on the back foot, but I still don't think that we've seen the best from Yuki Tsunoda. I think there's more from him to come. Hopefully that will be the case. In Nick De Vries, we've got a driver that had one outing in Formula One and impressed everybody in a very difficult car to drive. Monza and Bahrain are different circuits, but there is some light there that I'm trying to throw towards AlphaTauri, despite the fact that we've just run them down, and we did so in the pre-season review.
I don't think you're wrong to do it, though, Adam. I do believe that the hopes of the team, whatever they may be, will rely on Nick De Vries. The guys performed in every category that he's participated in. So he will be the guy. If results are available, it will be Nick De Vries that will be mopping up the results. I agree. I think they will be fighting to avoid the wooden spoon, the very back of the grid, because I'm sure we'll go on to it. I think Williams look like they're taking a step forward. So I think Williams the last couple of seasons have been, we won't finish last. Williams will have that covered. But now you've got Williams have upped their game, Haas have upped their game, and all of a sudden you're looking and thinking, well, someone has to finish last. And right now, I feel that could well be AlphaTauri.
Yeah, I think the battle at the back is very much going to be AlphaTauri and Williams this season. McLaren may be there in the early stages, but hopefully... I only say that because I feel like the other teams around them have all made step forwards. Yep. And as we talked about earlier, this doesn't feel like a fully developed 2023 McLaren car. I feel like this is one that the concept that we talked about before that was abandoned, and they've just had to run with it until the new one is ready. So I think for now, that's kind of where you have to put them compared to everybody else, and hopefully they can up their game. But after that, AlphaTauri, Williams, that's going to be an interesting battle. Obviously, Yuki Tsunoda, Nick De Vries, I can't help but feel that this is an audition season for both of them, where one of them is going to be driving that car in 2024, and whichever one loses, assuming it's on merit, is going to be seeing the trapdoor fall from underneath them.
I fully agree, and I feel that AlphaTauri are a team that are in need of a revamp. They need a breath of fresh air. So, like, I do worry for Yuki Tsunoda. And the Red Bull program, they're always looking at the younger drivers, giving them a chance to come into the sport. So, yeah, I feel the pressure will be more on Yuki Tsunoda this year. But I do feel that Nick De Vries will give the team the results when they become available. So, the pressure will be on Yuki this year.
Yeah, we had some news as well regarding the future of AlphaTauri, because obviously there were rumours about whether or not they were going to be sold. Were Red Bull looking for prospective buyers? Of course, we have a few prospective F1 entries doing the rounds, may look for an avenue into F1 by buying into AlphaTauri rather than making a new team themselves. Franz Tost, the team principal there, had a few interesting words to say on that. He came out and saying, and I quote, "I had some very good meetings with Oliver Mintzlaff, who confirmed that the shareholders will not sell Scuderia AlphaTauri and that Red Bull will continue supporting the team in the future. All these rumours have no foundation, and the team has to remain focused for the start of the season to perform better than last year." For AlphaTauri fans, that's pretty good on the surface, and at least for the time being, it looks like, the status quo remains. I wouldn't be surprised if the picture changes throughout the year. I also wouldn't be surprised if Red Bull want an AlphaTauri base closer in the UK, maybe something to make it more attractive to prospective buyers. So for now, it looks like nothing is happening with AlphaTauri, but I'd be very surprised if that's the last that we hear of it. Moving on to the final team we haven't talked about yet, Williams. Now, Courtney, you already teased the idea that Williams look like they're going to make a step forward. Granted, they were the team that had the biggest step forward to make, given how far they were behind. James Vowles at the helm hasn't been in the job very, very long. At this point, it's still a fact-finding mission for him to try and find out what is going on at Williams, how he can try and turn this team into a more competitive outfit, and more importantly, getting the certain different elements and departments within Williams to start working together rather than against each other. They've got Alex Albon, a very accomplished, inexperienced driver, doing well at the team. I'm sure Williams are going to have to do well to try and convince him to commit his medium to long-term future with them. And they've got a rookie in Logan Sargent, who obviously provides an opportunity for excitement and enthusiasm and hope going forward at the team. But of course, that's going to come with pressure on his young shoulders as well. Suppose the question is, Courtney, are Williams ready to make that step up?
They have started well in pre-season, and again, it's Alex Albon. He has this knack of getting these big results, doesn't he? So he's going to have to be doing that at the beginning of the season, because you can't help but feel that the teams around them, if you ever look at, we expect them to compete with the likes of McLaren. McLaren will start getting some results. To which level, we don't know, but Williams will need to be taking advantage early on this season, and I think they will do that with Alex Albon. Look, Logan Sargent is definitely an unknown quantity. There will be a lot of excitement, obviously being an American, so there'll be a lot of hopes surrounding him. I'm going to be intrigued to see how he gets on. Look, I'm going to be honest here. I don't know a lot about the guy, so I'm going to be interested. To see how he gets on. But the early races will be crucial for Williams' season, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. With Logan Sargent in particular, I think we can be honest here. He's not. From what I understand, he's not the guy that the American fans were really massively getting behind, saying, yes, this is the guy that Americans want to see in Formula One. He wasn't. Colson Herta was. But Colson's not driving in F1 right now. Maybe one day he will be. But until then, we're just going to have to see what Logan can do. But I think Logan has a huge role to play in the American interest in Formula One. We're going to have 3 F1 races this season in Miami, Austin, and of course Las Vegas, which F1 have been promoting to the nth degree. And that's going to be a glitz and glamour fest to which we've never seen before. And this is F1, that's something you think we'd be used to. We ain't seen nothing yet by the sounds of it. But it's going to be a big year for Logan. We'll have to wait and see how he does. There's going to be a lot of learning, a lot of catching up to do. I want to see him make some level of progress as the season goes on. I'm not expecting miracles. I don't think he's driving a car that's going to allow that anyway. It's quite interesting, actually, Courtney. We've got a few teams this year that have drivers that you could make an argument that probably shouldn't be there if drivers were in teams based on their quality compared to the car. I mean, I mean this in the most respectful way possible, but you've got Alex Albon at Williams. You've got Valtteri Bottas at Alfa Romeo. You could make an argument and say you've got Lando Norris in McLaren right now. And as I said, I think you have to. There is going to be something interesting that comes from that. And with someone like Alex Albon as well, that is your trump card, if you like, with Williams. He might be able to pull some results out of the bag. I suppose we'll see where they really are on merit in terms of car performance, to find a balance between where Albon is and where Sargent is, and try and find somewhere in the middle. Ultimately, he's got to try and do a better job for the team of what Latifi was doing, because that's kind of what they need. Latifi wasn't terrible, but there wasn't progress over the time he was there. Sargent, that's what he needs to be doing, and hopefully he's afforded enough time and resource to do that.
Well, that's the problem for Logan Sargent now, is that, as I said, Williams need the results early. So there will be pressure, even though it won't be obvious pressure, but behind the scenes, they'll be thinking, if Williams come out the block strong, they're going to be like, look, we need to pick up the results now. And if Logan Sargent doesn't do that, there's already going to be pressure building on him. So that dynamic called Williams is definitely one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, with James Vowles at the helm, it might be an opportunity for Logan and even for Alex Albon to try and shape and mould this team in the way that they would want to going forward. I mean, Alex has been involved in a great outfit at Red Bull. He knows what makes them tick. James knows what makes Mercedes tick. He knows what a championship winning team looks like. Williams aren't there. They haven't been there for a long, long time. And we can make cases for when Williams were close back in 2014 when they looked pretty good and things were different there. But, of course, we can't keep going back on this. It's been a long time since Williams were at the front, and it's well overdue. Not expecting it to happen overnight, but I think there's a bit of a project here. There's a bit of a process, if you like, and we'll have to wait and see how that all goes down. Moving on to the final part of this episode, Courtney, something we did last year, but I want to make this a little bit more interesting. Don't worry, there's going to be no bets or forfeits involved in this one. But regarding our bold predictions for this weekend's race. I think we need to tally some of these up to see how we do over the course of the season. It makes sense to. So, of course, when Lee returns, he will take part as well. But obviously, he's not here right now. He's away at the moment, so he's going to be already behind after the first race. So, simple rules, Courtney. We'll do our top 3 predictions for the race. Do a qualifying predictions for pole position. You get an extra point. A point for each correct prediction. So, even if they're in the top 3, they have to be in the correct prediction for them to get it. Or should I change that? Should we just get a point for each person if they're in the top 3, or do you want
No, let's be specific.
Let's be specific. Okay.
Yeah,
okay, we'll be specific. So a point for each correct top 3 prediction, and a point for pole position, and a nice 3 points if you get a bold prediction correctly. And I must stress, let's try and make this a little bit bold, if you like. No sort of easy cop-outs, if you like, because I think that's, because if we had Leon, he'd probably try and come up with something that's easy, like, Ferrari will be red. I don't know. But Lee knows where we're going. So, Courtney, what are we doing? Who's going to be on pole position for Sunday's race?
Max Verstappen.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. I'm going to go with Max Verstappen as well. And what about our top 3?
Max will win, Leclerc second, and Sainz third.
I'm going to go Max wins, Perez second, Leclerc third. And bold prediction.
This one's going to be fairly predictable. I'm going to say a top 5 finish for Fernando Alonso.
I think that's a pretty bold one. I'm going to stick with Aston Martin as well. And this one is kind of dependent on whether or not he actually drives this weekend, so we'll wait and see. It could be over before we even see a wheel turn. But if Drugovich does drive this weekend, I'm predicting points for him.
Okay.
I think that counts as a bold one. I think that's fair.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, okay. So there we go. We've got our predictions in. By the end of the race review, we'll tally those up and see how we did. And of course, over the course of the season, Courtney, we'll have to try and see how we do. One other thing we should mention, we dabbled in F1 Fantasy last season. We're going to do it again this year. We're going to put the code for the league over the course of the race weekend. So please do join and take part. I think I come second last season. I got absolutely destroyed, but I think it was Red Bullinio who beat me in that one. No surprise there. Courtney, are you partaking in the F1 fantasy game this season? Repping Team DNF1?
I'd have to do my research first. I don't want to go in blindfolded.
Well, I think if there's one tip I will say, pick Fernando Alonso. That seems to be the value for money pick for a lot of people. I have to try and get Lee involved as well. But guys, yes, we will be taking part in F1 fantasy this year. We will have a DNF1 league like we did last season. I'll have to try and come up with a prize for the winner as an added incentive. But if you can beat myself, Lee, or Courtney in F1 Fantasy and fancy having had a go, then join in. It's open to play, absolutely free, and it could be a fun one this season. But guys, as always, if you have enjoyed this episode, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We've passed our milestone of 1,000 subscribers now, so of course the next one has to be 100,000 subscribers because we want that silver plaque. Why not? But please help us out if you can. Of course, if you have enjoyed this on your favourite pod platform, make sure to leave us a 5-star review if you think that we are worthy. Of course, let us know if you do it on Spotify via our social channels so we can give you a shout out on Apple Podcasts. Same thing. We'll give you a shout out for a 5-star review. But until then, guys, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe and enjoy the race this weekend. 2023 is about to get underway. Will Max Verstappen dominate the season? Will Ferrari get their act together? Will Mercedes or even Aston Martin shock or surprise? We'll have to wait and see. But until then, guys, take care. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, as always, if you're not first, you're probably DNF1. Take care.
See you soon.